Hello everyone. Welcome back to our channel. This video presents a critical examination of global governance systems throughout history, highlighting how governments, politicians, and oligarchs have throughout history consistently failed humanity through wars, exploitation, and self-serving policies. We'll analyze the historical failures of both US-style democracy and Chinese authoritarianism, arguing that neither model serves the interests of humanity as a whole. The video warns of an emerging technological arms race between the US and China to develop artificial superintelligence, ASI, and quantum computing capabilities, which could lead to unprecedented global risks if these powerful technologies remain under the control of competing superpowers or profit-driven tech oligarchs and corporations. As an alternative, in this video we propose a new global governance framework called the United Human Organization. This would be a private, citizen-funded organization representing all nations and cultures, not controlled by governments. It would leverage blockchain technology for transparent voting and oversight, and would develop Benevolent ASI to guide global affairs according to collective human values rather than narrow national or corporate interests. We envision how these technologies, properly governed through a global citizens initiative, could bring about unprecedented benefits, eradicating diseases, extending lifespans, solving climate change, optimizing resource distribution, and creating material abundance for all humanity. We conclude by emphasizing that the future of humanity depends on choosing collaborative governance of these powerful technologies rather than allowing them to be controlled by competing power blocks. This video is in 3 parts. Part 1 is titled, The Failure of Current Global Governance. It provides an analysis of historical governance failures, documentation of wars, conflicts, regime changes, how superpowers and corporations exploit other nations. Part 2 is titled, The Emerging Technological Threats and Opportunities. This includes the rise of the Techno-Lords, the US-China technological arms race, the unprecedented risks of ASI under competitive control. Part 3 is titled, The United Human Organization, a New Framework for Global Governance. It has the detailed proposal for the United Human Organization structure, how blockchain, ASI, and quantum computing would work together, the potential benefits of properly governed technology, and vision of the utopian possibilities. So, let's begin our journey with Part 1, the failure of current global governance. Imagine our world is run by artificial superintelligence entities, or ASI as it is called, and not governments and corporations. Imagine that nations no longer need governments to run affairs because ASI entities can govern far more fairly and efficiently. They can govern hundreds of times more efficiently than inept, selfish, and often corrupt governments run by humans who are prone to frequently making huge and devastating blunders. The present national and global governance structures were designed for an earlier era and struggle to address modern complex, transnational challenges. Meanwhile, technologies like artificial intelligence and quantum computing are advancing at unprecedented rates, creating both extraordinary opportunities and existential risks. We need governance frameworks sophisticated enough to harness perhaps these last human inventions, as AI is all set to outperform human intelligence, some say within the next decade, if not sooner. History has proven over and over again that national governments work for their own national interests, often without much regard for humanity as a whole. The tribal human mentality has not changed despite our evolution from caves to cities. Our thinking is still tribal, even though we have grown into nations consisting of millions of people, from ancient tribes consisting of just 75 to 100 people at most. Our loyalty to our nations is no different than the loyalty of our ancestors to their small tribe. We are conditioned to only consider the lives of our tribe mates as important, and other nations are looked upon as non-humans, with their lives less important. Governments run by monarchs, military dictators, politicians, and oligarchs prey on this tribal behavior to control their subjects and protect their own personal vested interests. Throughout human history, they have led their tribes, now nations, into wars and conflicts. Sometimes religious motivations have fueled conflicts, such as the Crusades, and many times it is territorial expansion and cultural domination. You can trace this back to countless military campaigns, from Alexander's conquests to the Roman, Islamic, and European expansion through wars, battles, and colonial conflicts. The European colonization of Australia resulted in the systematic dispossession and decimation of Aboriginal peoples through frontier violence, disease, and deliberate policies aimed at eliminating indigenous cultures. Similarly, the Spanish conquest sanctioned by the Spanish Queen Isabella and led by Hernán Cortés devastated the Aztec and Maya civilizations through warfare, disease, and cultural suppression, while in North America, the expansion of European settlements led to the forced displacement and decimation of Native American tribes through events like the Trail of Tears and battles such as Wounded Knee. These patterns of ethnic cleansing and racial subjugation underpin human nature and its compulsion of conflicts across continents and eras, from the Battle of Blood River in South Africa in 1838 to colonial conquests worldwide. It is a clear demonstration of how the drive for territorial, religious, and cultural dominance has repeatedly led to the marginalization and elimination of indigenous peoples and minority groups throughout human history. We would have hoped that the 20th century would start off on a peaceful note. After all, humans had become more civilized, or at least it seemed from the way in which cities were developing and well-lit. But human nature could not resist conflicts and violence. World War I, which began in 1914 and lasted for 4 years, emerged from a complex web of territorial ambitions, nationalistic fervor, and imperial competition, with battles like Verdun and the Somme exemplifying the devastating human cost. Millions of souls perished, and the economies of warring nations and livelihoods of many more millions of their citizens came to a standstill. In 1939, World War II saw these elements intensified through racial ideology, with the Nazi regime's quest for living space and racial dominance leading to unprecedented destruction across Europe and the Pacific, including the battles of Stalingrad and Normandy. An estimated 70 to 85 million people died during World War II, making it the deadliest conflict in human history, with a significant portion of those deaths being civilians who had nothing to do with the decisions to go to war. Some historians blame two leaders, or rulers, Adolf Hitler and Winston Churchill, for the financial collapse of the entire continent. This collapse was so monumental that beyond going financially bankrupt, Europe lost most of its childbearing youth and now have a negative overall population growth rate. In the East, Japan inflicted unprecedented casualties on China and its other neighboring countries just to suffer a total collapse of its own civilization in the end. Some experts predict that the Japanese culture, including the Japanese language, will disappear into the wells of history within the next 50 years, since Japan has the lowest birth rate in the world. World War II virtually cost the once formidable and admired Japanese empire their entire centuries-old civilization and culture. The ancestors of Japanese people had carefully nurtured their civilization and culture with immense sacrifices and hard work, but a small number of ambitious Japanese generals and politicians blew it all away, or shall we say it was blown to smithereens in seconds by just 2 nuclear bombs. One would think that after World War II, leaders of nations would have learned their lesson of entering into reckless conflicts. In the Second World War, several empires were obliterated. The British, French, Italians, and the Japanese had lost most of their youth. The lesson from the war was loud and clear, that attempts to resolve conflicts through military means cause unnecessary misery and tremendous loss of life. But once again, humanity's insatiable appetite for wealth and power prevailed over better judgment. In this century, the 2003 invasion of Iraq stands as a stark illustration of how easily a superpower with unwise leadership, aided by ethically deficient and compromised mainstream media channels, can manipulate world opinion to pursue hidden objectives. Under the false pretense that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, a claim later proven entirely fabricated, the United States launched a war that resulted in hundreds of thousands of Iraqi deaths, destabilized an entire region, and decimated a society with ancient cultural roots. The real motivation, many scholars and analysts have concluded, centered on securing access to Iraq's vast oil reserves and establishing strategic military presence in the Middle East. Despite worldwide protests and insufficient evidence, sophisticated media campaigns with the collaboration of mainstream media and carefully crafted intelligence narratives swayed enough international opinion to enable a devastating military campaign against Iraq. The consequences for USA of this blunder are still being felt 21 years after the invasions. USA lost $6 trillion in the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan, and went from a once respected sole superpower with a $500 billion in surplus to a controversial, untrustworthy, and near-bankrupt and confused empire with over $36 trillion in national debt. Now imagine if those $6 trillion had been spent to uplift the living standards of American citizens and modernize the national infrastructure. Moreover, a portion of that would have been enough to provide free higher education, housing, and health benefits to all Americans for years to come. But all that great opportunity was lost due to bad decisions by a few small-minded and selfish humans running USA affairs. According to well-renowned geopolitical scientists and global economic experts like Jeffrey Sachs, Noam Chomsky, Richard Wolff, Robert Fisk, Robert Reich, Yanis Varoufakis, Chris Hedges, David Frum, and countless others. The once respected sole superpower, USA, might be on the brink of losing its unipolar global power and influence, and our world might be entering a bipolar era with China, Russia, and perhaps a conglomerate of other collectively wielding equal or even more power. What's interesting to note is that just as the European empire's collapse was caused by a handful of individuals, and we name Winston Churchill and Hitler among the leading figures, the American empire's current woes can be attributed to a handful of American politicians, key figures, and oligarchs. Notable among these is the 43rd President of the United States, George Bush Jr., his Vice President Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, and other so-called hawks like Condoleezza Rice, Paul Wolfowitz, Douglas Feith, Richard Pearl, John Bolton, William Kristol, Bob Kagan on the intellectual side, and Max Boot. Most of these individuals held influential positions in the Bush administration and pushed for the 2003 invasion of Iraq, a war that inflicted irreparable damage and wounds to the USA economy, prestige, and stature as the most admired and progressive nation in modern history, if not the entire history of our civilization. The ease with which such false propaganda could be leveraged to justify the destruction of an entire nation raises chilling questions about how similar tactics might be employed in an era of even more powerful technologies. Mass-scale propaganda has been a tool used by governments, especially from the early 20th century, to manufacture consent. Adolf Hitler used it effectively to rally the German citizens behind him to wage wars and also persecute Jews living in Germany and Poland. Several million innocent Jews were murdered by Hitler. Similarly, Jews and Gypsies in Russia faced the same fate as Stalin used mass propaganda to support his murders. The most recent example of mainstream media's unethical role in fanning conflicts is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories. This represents a stark case where religious claims, territorial control, and cultural tensions have resulted in genocide by Israel of the unprotected and totally vulnerable Palestinian people. This indifference to the plight of Palestinians has reached such an abhorring level that real estate tycoons in the West have already started promotional campaigns to build resorts and golf courses on occupied territories of the totally helpless and beleaguered Palestinian people, while at the same time, USA-made bombs, missiles, and death is constantly punishing even children and infants in the same war-stricken territories where these resorts and golf courses are shamelessly being proposed. The irony is that all this is happening despite the United Nations organization having passed numerous resolutions supporting Palestinian statehood and refugee rights, from Resolution 181, 1947, recommending partition, to Resolution 194, 1948, affirming refugee rights, Resolution 3236, 1974, reaffirming Palestinian self-determination, and more recent measures upgrading Palestine's status. Yet these formal declarations stand in stark contrast to the reality on the ground, where Palestinians continue to face displacement, occupation, and systematic denial of their internationally recognized rights. This glaring disparity between proclamation and practice represents perhaps the most damning indictment of contemporary global governance structures. The United Nations was established following the end of World War II. The organization was created to promote international peace and prevent future conflicts on the scale of the two world wars. The UN Charter was signed by 51 founding member states at the San Francisco Conference on June 26, 1945, and officially came into existence when it was ratified by the required number of nations, including the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. Today, the UN has grown to include 193 member states, but has miserably failed to accomplish its mission of maintaining international peace and security and promoting social progress and human rights. This original video is a reminder of how far United Nations has strayed from its charter.
Here in the midst of war, the world's people collaborated in the drafting of a workable international constitution. It was a conference to write a people's charter, opening with the words, "We, the people of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind."
Many who doubted that agreement could ever be reached by these 50 countries, differing so much in race and religion, in language and culture. But these differences were all forgotten in one unshakable unity of determination to find a way to end war.
This charter points the way, but whether the world is to move in that direction will depend finally upon the vigilance and sovereign will of the peoples of the world.
The very superpower that championed the UN's formation and its binding charter, which explicitly mandates maintaining international peace, upholding international law, and promoting universal respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms without distinction, has repeatedly wielded its veto power to shield its regional ally from accountability while providing billions in military aid that enables continued violations. When one reads the full UN Charter, which reads as, the UN Charter mandates the UN and its member states to maintain international peace and security, uphold international law, achieve higher standards of living for their citizens, address economic, social, health, and related problems, and promote universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. As a charter and constituent treaty, its rules and obligations are binding on all members and supersede those of other treaties. There you have it. Any sane person observing what is going on with the millions of Palestinian people in the Middle East would immediately recognize the profound disconnect between the UN Charter's binding obligations and the reality on the ground. The Charter's clear mandates to maintain peace, uphold international law, and ensure universal human rights stand in stark contrast to the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Palestine, where civilians face bombardment, displacement, and severe restrictions on basic necessities. This glaring contradiction exposes not just a failure of enforcement, but a fundamental breakdown in the international order, where selective application of principles has rendered the most basic protections meaningless for an entire population. The Palestinian crisis illuminates a disturbing truth about our global governance system. The entire framework stands fundamentally compromised, a hollow structure where noble principles are consistently sacrificed at the altar of raw power. International organizations meant to uphold justice have devolved into theaters of empty symbolism, where resolutions pile up without enforcement and humanitarian concerns bow before geopolitical calculations. This profound contradiction between the lofty ideals enshrined in charters and the brutal realities on the ground reveals a system paralyzed by power politics, where strategic alliances consistently override legal and moral imperatives. What makes this failure particularly chilling is its implications for our collective future. Today, it is Palestinians enduring this systemic abandonment, but tomorrow larger populations could face similar indifference when their suffering becomes inconvenient to global powers. When the world's most powerful nations can ignore with impunity the very rules they established and championed, raises existential questions about whether our international institutions and global governance system, as currently constructed, is compatible with humanity anymore, and whether it can ever fulfill their foundational promise of creating a more just and peaceful world order. Serious questions are being raised as to why the international organizations are tools of the powerful and are deployed selectively to maintain an unjust status quo while providing the comforting illusion of moral governance. Not all evil plans of expansion and hegemony have used military force and weapons. The tactic of instigating regime changes using pre-planted economic hitmen, provoking civil unrest and civil wars to weaken other nations and maintain control of vast territories with valuable resources, has been employed for centuries. The colonial empires habitually used a divide-and-rule strategy and instigated civil unrest to rule over vast territories, using indigenous front men and women as their representative rulers. The modern form of this practice is regime change operations conducted by superpowers like the USA and Russia. According to one study, the U.S. performed at least 81 overt and covert known interventions in foreign elections from 1946 to 2000. According to another study, the U.S. engaged in 64 covert and 6 overt attempts at regime change during the Cold War. Similarly, Russia has engaged in several regime change operations as well. These interventions have catastrophic consequences beyond the immediate political shifts. They destroy infrastructure, economies, and social fabrics of already vulnerable nations, pushing them deeper into poverty and debt traps. The ensuing instability creates humanitarian crises, forcing millions to flee their homelands and seek asylum in developed countries, thereby triggering immigration challenges that fuel xenophobia and right-wing extremism in host nations. The destruction of functioning institutions leaves power vacuums often filled by extremist groups, creating new security threats. Meanwhile, the targeted populations suffer generational trauma, economic devastation, and the loss of cultural heritage and national sovereignty. Once these nations are exposed, organizations such as the International Monetary Fund, or IMF as it is known, the World Bank, and other parasitic institutions are launched to prey on the carcass of these countries, stripping them of valuable resources and enslaving them in debt for generations. IMF extends debt to a beleaguered nation partially or solely to increase political leverage of its influencers, or those who fund the IMF. And guess who is the largest contributor? The United States, of course. As the largest cumulative contributor to the IMF at $155 billion and the largest voting bloc, the U.S. has effective veto power for many decisions. This parasitic model of first creating chaos and then encircling the victim nations into a debt trap has typically worked in the following manner. After an orchestrated crisis has devastated the target nation, IMF extends excessive credit to that country with the intention of extracting economic or political concessions. The conditions of the loans are often extremely stringent and harsh on the citizens of the borrower nation and often not publicized. When the debtor country becomes unable to meet its repayment obligations, IMF demands structural adjustment programs and political alignment as instructed by its largest voting bloc. Moreover, a large portion of the borrowed money by the victim country is siphoned off by its corrupt elite class and makes it back to financial centers in the rich countries, while the remaining amount commonly pays for contractors and materials sourced from the major influencers in IMF. That is why these countries are unable to progress and forever remain in a circus of circular debt. Today, there are almost 93 countries owing money to IMF. The top 10 debtors' nations account for more than two-thirds, or almost 70%, of the outstanding balance. These countries are South Africa, Angola, Pakistan, Ukraine, Colombia, Ecuador, Argentina, Ivory Coast, Egypt, and Nigeria. The most recent regime change operation was allegedly conducted in Pakistan on the 10th of April in 2022 to overthrow what many describe as a thriving and progressive government under Prime Minister Imran Khan, and replacing it with hand-picked officials whom critics characterize as corrupt because Pakistan was reportedly not following USA directives. These interventions, whether through economic sanctions, funding opposition groups, or information warfare, represent a modern form of imperialism that prioritizes geopolitical advantage over human welfare and international stability. Another instrument used by powerful countries, for example the United States, to influence elections and policy in poor countries is U.S. aid, which stands for U.S. Agency for International Development. Ironically, U.S. aid was originally formed in 1961 to extend assistance to countries recovering from disaster, trying to escape poverty, and engaging in democratic reforms. But over the course of the years, the agency has become a covert foreign policy instrument. For example, in 2014, U.S. aid was accused of secretly creating a Cuban Twitter called Zunzunio to stir unrest and undermine the Cuban government. In 2023, Mexico's president asked his U.S. counterpart, Joe Biden, to stop U.S. aid from funding groups hostile to the Mexican government, echoing previous Mexican criticism of U.S. interventionism. He claimed that the U.S. government, specifically through U.S. aid, has for some time been financing organizations openly against the legal and legitimate democratic government of Mexico. While the U.S. has long touted U.S. aid, in part, as strengthening young democracies, it has used U.S. aid to support friendly dictators and authoritarian regimes during the Cold War, including Taiwan, Pakistan, and South Korea when they were under military rule, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo under Mobutu Sese Seko. During the early years of the 21st century, when the United States was busy with its wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, another emerging nation accelerated its pursuit towards becoming a superpower. This nation was no other than China, the largest trading partner of the U.S. and also the largest U.S. Treasury bonds buyer. So in essence, China was selling its goods to the U.S. and investing the sales proceeds in U.S. Treasury bonds. This debt to China amounted to trillions of dollars and provided the U.S. with money to keep the domestic economy wheels spinning, as well as money to finance the expensive wars. But once China surfaced as a formidable economic and military force, they made their move and initiated their devious plans for global hegemony. China's debt trap diplomacy in Central Asia started with the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. China's conceived a strategy of extending excessive loans to heavily indebted countries that cannot repay them, ultimately forcing these nations to surrender strategic assets to China through debt-for-equity swaps. By 2023, Central Asia's collective debt to China reached $15.7 billion, or 7.6% of the region's external debt. The impact varies significantly across countries. For example, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and Pakistan have accumulated billions of dollars of Chinese debt. This has major strategic implications. Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan are most vulnerable to surrendering infrastructure if unable to repay. Potential Chinese control could include Kyrgyz power plants, transmission lines, roads, and Tajik gold and silver mines. This dependency threatens these nations' ability to maintain balanced foreign policies. Anti-Chinese sentiment has increased in the vulnerable countries, and critics warn about Chinese geopolitical expansion. China's loan policies will likely continue in Central Asia, with the ongoing Ukraine conflict providing further opportunities for Chinese economic expansion in the region. The rise of China began 2 decades ago while U.S. was busy in Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Now, China represents a significant challenge to U.S.-led international capitalism due to fundamental contradictions within the unilateral rules-based system imposed on the global order. While the U.S. neoliberal capitalist model shows signs of decline, marked by extreme inequality and increasing economic and political instability, China's socialist system continues to achieve near 5% annual growth. China has made remarkable progress in advanced technologies and manufacturing, as evidenced by recent breakthroughs from companies like DeepSeek in advanced AI. Over the past decade, China has successfully expanded its global influence and goodwill, while the U.S. focused on regime changes and conflicts across multiple regions, including the Middle East and Ukraine. Critics argue that China has strategically leveraged this opportunity through what we termed earlier as debt diplomacy, providing loans to nations unlikely to repay them, potentially to secure future political and alliance benefits. While concrete evidence of impropriety in these lending practices remains limited, risks exist, particularly if U.S. interference destabilizes debtor economies. In such scenarios, China might employ more assertive tactics to recover loans, with unpredictable consequences. U.S. national security strategists consistently warn that leadership in emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence and quantum computing will determine global dominance in the future. U.S. hawks perceive China's substantial investments and advancements in these fields as attempts to displace American primacy across economic, industrial, technological, military, and geopolitical domains. Let's now look at China's governance system. China has a single-party so-called benevolent dictatorial regime with a dismal record of human rights and freedom of speech. Even though China has successfully developed a large middle class in a short period, yet its internal machinery of governance is concealed from the rest of the world. What is known of China is that China has over 600 million cameras throughout the country watching the movement of people and automobiles, making China the most surveilled nation in the world. China has nuclear weapons and a large and advanced fighting force, comprising of a powerful navy, air force, and well-trained troops on the ground. The size of PLA, People's Liberation Army as China calls their force, is over 2 million active duty personnel, of which approximately 1 million is their fighting force, making it the world's largest military. In recent years, China also has made tremendous progress in AI and quantum computing technology. Just recently, new large language models from China emerged that sent shockwaves in Silicon Valley. DeepSeek, a Chinese AI startup, has prompted a significant reckoning in the AI technology hubs worldwide, challenging the dominance of American AI giants and prompting discussions about the future of AI development, particularly regarding cost-effectiveness and open-source models. DeepSeek developed their DeepSeek reasoning model for a mere $5 million, whereas Google, Meta, and OpenAI spent between $150 million to $600 million on their equivalent models. In quantum computing, China is also at par with the U.S. China recently unveiled its most advanced quantum computer, the Tianyan 504, featuring a 504-qubit chip named Xiaohong. It reportedly surpasses Google's Willow chip in performance. It is safe to assume that the Chinese government will, and if not already has, incorporated advanced AI and quantum computing technologies into their defense programs, as well as citizen surveillance programs. Where all this leads to in the future is anyone's guess, but the chances of Chinese citizens being totally free, in the sense of true freedom of speech, freedom to protest, freedom to dissent, etc., are becoming bleaker by the day. This alone makes the Chinese model of governance incompatible with the rest of the world. The Chinese model of governance is too militaristic, too robotic, and may call it too suffocating. Chinese people may be used to it as they are born into it and have no choice but to accept it, but it is not compatible with the rest of the world. As far as China's hegemonic designs, China's debt trap diplomacy in Central Asia has been successful, and their Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, is well underway. Do we see a future where many nations will be under China's direct influence, that is solidly in the Chinese camp? The answer is yes. Is this a matter of concern to Western powers, especially the US? The answer is yes. US is unwilling to accept the fact that many nations may slip out of US influence and align their interests and economies, including their currencies, with China. China is not a threat to the US in military terms, but China, once a welcome trading partner and largest US Treasury bonds client, is now being portrayed by US politicians as a rival that is challenging the unipolar superpower status of the US. This is causing tensions between the two nations, and we can expect the technology race, specifically in AI and quantum supremacy, to heat up, elevating threat levels. If provocations flamed by mostly Western politicians continue, we don't really know how China will react. Any misadventures by Western powers may lead to a war of the scale that the world has never seen. It might actually be the last war that mankind ever fights. We can only guess of the consequences. This concludes Part 1. In Part 2, we'll explore the emerging technological threats and opportunities, examining how artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and biotechnology are reshaping global power dynamics. We'll analyze why the entities that now control majority of the compute infrastructure, talent, and have enormous financial resources create new vulnerabilities as they form alliances with politicians and the military establishment. United States and China are not the only superpowers with hegemonic designs. There is a third force that geopolitical and strategic thinkers believe is rising to challenge the status quo of running global affairs. The former Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis calls this force Techno-Lords. He argues that capitalism is being replaced by techno-feudalism, a new system characterized by cloud capital and non-wage labor extraction. For historical context, techno-feudalism first took roots in the Silicon Valley, California in the 1990s and generated enormous wealth for a few young tech entrepreneurs. Notable among them was the group commonly known as the PayPal Mafia, which refers to former PayPal founders and employees who went on to create successful technology companies, including LinkedIn, Palantir Technologies, SpaceX, Tesla, YouTube, Affirm, and others. Besides the PayPal Mafia, there were several other tech entrepreneurs who became billionaires in a short span of less than a decade. This new form of capital, cloud capital, is based on systems that create a dialectical ping-pong, where users train algorithms that then train users. This creates extraction of value without traditional wage labor. There are three main powers that cloud capitalists have been able to accrue for themselves. The power to manipulate preferences at scale through algorithmic learning. The power to extract non-waged labor, which means content creation and data generation, etc. And the power to accumulate unprecedented wealth without profitability through financial markets, which allows them to spawn or acquire new innovative companies, creating a cycle of perpetual growth. They just keep getting bigger and wealthier without producing anything or showing any profits. In essence, they have successfully replaced traditional markets by algorithmic fiefdoms. Notable examples are Amazon, Meta, formerly Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, X, and other platforms. Like medieval feudal lords who extracted rents from their land tenants, these new tech giants extract value directly rather than through markets. Amazon does not manufacture any product. They extract value from the data of consumer behavior and commissions from the merchants who sell their products on the Amazon platform. These platforms have become so massive that their valuations are several times more than GDPs of entire countries. Supporting technology innovation and spawning new companies, however, is not their only interest. They gradually started delving into politics as financiers of Democratic Party candidates, and over the years consolidated unprecedented political influence and power. For example, after Donald Trump's 2024 election victory, tech billionaire Elon Musk, one of the founders of PayPal, has gained direct influence in government. He is the co-lead Trump's new Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. This tech political alliance is a convergence between tech libertarianism and right-wing politics, with figures like billionaires Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and Vivek Ramaswamy gaining direct influence in the incoming and most likely future administrations. There are major global implications of this tech political alliance with ramifications that go beyond the US, potentially threatening democratic institutions worldwide, and empowering authoritarian regimes. This concentration of wealth and political power in the hands of a few tech billionaires represents a significant challenge to democracy. The oligarchic behavior of these billionaires is already raising serious concerns in terms of defying democratic institutions. One incident is Musk's standoff with Brazil's judiciary when he refused to comply with legal orders regarding his social media platform X, formerly Twitter. The tech libertarianism and right-wing politics alliance can be traced back to 2016. Peter Thiel was the first of these tech billionaires to embrace Trump in the 2016 elections, speaking at the Republican National Convention, donating $1.25 million to support the campaign, and even working alongside Steve Bannon on Trump's transition team. According to New York Times, Peter Thiel also helped current U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance raise $120 million for his own venture firm, Naria Capital. When J.D. Vance ran for Senate in 2022, Thiel was by far the biggest donor to his super PAC, giving $15 million and helped him in getting elected. This was followed by Elon Musk donating more than $238 million to his own political action committee, America PAC, which aggressively campaigned on the ground in swing states for the Trump campaign. Musk donated an additional $43 million to RBG PAC and other pro-Trump groups, for a total of $281 million. Experts believe that now the Trump administration plans to unite populists with Silicon Valley tech giants against China. For example, Mark Andreessen, the founder of the first web browser Mosaic and co-founder of Netscape, has been actively preparing for a potential war with China in 2027, including developing tabletop exercises to simulate supply chain disruptions. J.D. Vance is actively promoting Mark Andreessen's Techno-Optimist Manifesto, which argues that technology, particularly artificial intelligence, is the solution to all problems that America is facing and can unite both populists and tech elites to solve these problems. This is a contradiction and an utter lie because while these tech leaders often speak about democratization and free speech, their actions frequently contradict these stated values, using their platforms to manipulate information and consolidate power. Why is it so troubling that the Techno-Lords are beginning to wield so much political power and influence that they are able to help elect senators, vice presidents, and presidents? This is alarming for many reasons, but foremost of them are: first, Techno-Lords appear to have established a beachhead inside the White House and will no doubt promote their agenda of regulatory changes, most likely strengthen government regulations in artificial intelligence development where it suits them in form of regulatory capture and reduce oversight where they need total freedom to do whatever they want. Secondly, the Techno-Lords have acquired enormous compute, talent, and capital to acquire or develop futuristic technologies like advanced artificial intelligence large language models, quantum computers, robotics, self-driven automobiles, and biotech companies that are developing longevity-related drugs. These tech leaders control vast amounts of data, wealth, and digital infrastructure with minimal accountability. This is not trivial, because advanced AI in the hands of a coalition of tech giants with their asset of surveillance capital, which is the data they have collected on citizens on their platforms over the past 2 decades, and the authoritarian right-wing leaning government will result in enormous power. Enough power to slowly chip away at the Constitution, defy the courts, and tighten the noose around citizens' rights under the garb of benevolent dictatorship. Once a tipping point is reached, that will be the end of democracy in America and the beginning of the establishment of a single-party government similar to China for the rest of America's future. Of course, the proponents will claim that the only way to fight China is if there are no internal distractions and political dissent. This is what America is heading towards: the U.S. government working with Techno-Lords to try to maintain monopolistic control over the high-tech sectors to prevent any competition so they can fight China and at the same time maximize their profits and their rent extraction from U.S. as well as global citizens. So far, we've just presented a summary of the report card of human-led governance of our world's affairs by the United States. We can see the model is mainly designed for hegemonic expansion and control over territory and resources of other weaker nations. We made the case that the existing U.S. democratic system of governance, despite idealistic promises, has failed to deliver substantive outcomes for its citizens as well as in countries where U.S. has direct influence. Moreover, it is also not aimed at preservation of the human species nor our planet, but instead it is centered on profits, wealth, and power serving the very top, the oligarch and elites of the world. United States, the richest and most powerful country in the world, supposedly democratic and run by educated and mature humans, squandered over $6 trillion in totally fabricated invasions and wars, and yet is not able to provide basic college education, housing, and medical benefits to all of its own citizens. So obviously the current U.S. governance model gets an F. American foreign policy has historically prioritized maximizing imperial power, leading to the classification of any serious challenger as an adversary. Consequently, the United States now appears committed to weakening and destabilizing China, with the ultimate objective of undermining the Chinese Communist Party and its distinctive socialist system. The technology race and geopolitical competition is increasing authoritarian tendencies and global governance challenges. While the United States is not facing imminent collapse, concerning evidence suggests a potential shift toward an authoritarian regime supported by technology oligarchs and surveillance capitalism. Historical precedent exists for such transitions, as demonstrated in the post-September 11, 2001 period, when the Bush administration restricted certain freedoms while justifying invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan under the banner of national security. A similar scenario may emerge with greater intensity and sustainability, as billionaire technology executives increasingly integrate with government administration. These Techno-Lords could potentially provide advanced AI technologies and decades of accumulated user data, their accumulated surveillance capital, to suppress dissent both domestically and internationally. This time, however, under the banner of protection of Western Judeo-Christian values, democracy and freedom, and neo-capitalism from an imminent Chinese invasion. The prospect of oligarchic control over the United States, digital subjugation of citizens, and escalating confrontation with socialist China presents grave concerns for the global population of approximately 9 billion people who lack agency in these developments. The current geopolitical landscape suggests that peaceful coexistence and prosperity face significant challenges. The world appears to be dividing into two primary blocks, one led by the United States and another centered around China, both exhibiting authoritarian characteristics, though expressed differently. China's governance model raises sustainability questions due to its one-party socialist structure, generating widespread mistrust. Simultaneously, the United States has become increasingly unreliable, failing to meet domestic obligations while repeatedly interfering in sovereign affairs, defying international institutions including the United Nations and International Criminal Court, and committing other violations. Global confidence in American leadership has eroded substantially and is unlikely to recover. Amidst this bifurcated emerging global order, we have a new technological threat multiplier. The combination of advanced artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and nuclear and biological weapons in the possession of two intensely nationalistic rivals presents an unacceptable risk to humanity. Despite apparent isolationist tendencies, the United States maintains hegemonic aspirations through economic leverage, regime change strategies, and alliance networks to preserve influence. Both superpowers are constructing competing alliance systems, the United States with traditional Western partners, and China with Russia and various nations across Latin America, Asia, and Africa. The existing international governance framework has proven inadequate, undermined particularly by U.S. actions against institutions like the UN and ICC. The most immediate danger lies in direct military confrontation between these powers as they compete for influence in overlapping regions. However, the fundamental problem remains, which is the accelerating development of technologies approaching superintelligence, coupled with the persistent failure of effective global governance. The current global governance model is entirely unprepared to manage the unprecedented challenges posed by AI and quantum computing, potentially the most transformative and unpredictable technologies in human history. Some experts characterize these as humanity's possible final invention. The consistent pattern of governance failures raises profound concerns about entrusting these same institutional structures with technologies far more powerful than any previously developed. Unlike nuclear weapons, which require substantial infrastructure and resources, technologies like superintelligent AI and quantum computing may prove more replicable, unpredictable, and fundamentally more dangerous. Superintelligent AI presents an unprecedented threat as the first technology capable of autonomous decision-making and independent ideation. While conventional weapons remain inert without human direction, superintelligent systems could potentially identify targets, develop novel weapon designs, formulate military strategies, and even create self-improvements without human input. These are not merely tools, but potentially alien entities with unfathomable intelligence. The risk is magnified by humanity's persistent disunity and the competitive nature of corporate and geopolitical landscapes. A paranoid authoritarian leader might delegate control to an imperfect AI system, including nuclear launch authority. AI developed in one nation could deploy undetectable disinformation, fraudulent financial operations, and synthetic identities across borders, undermining the foundational trust necessary for functional societies. In the emerging data colonies of the 21st century, dominance will not require military force but control of information infrastructure. Imagine foreign powers possessing complete personal histories of every politician, journalist, scientist, military officer, and executive in a target nation. Competition between these new empires creates a dangerous environment where cyber weapons, humanoid soldiers, and superintelligence-equipped drones can be deployed covertly without clear attribution, lowering barriers to conflict initiation and escalation. We are at a critical inflection point. Humanity has moved beyond questioning whether these technologies can be developed. The pressing question now is whether our governance systems have evolved sufficiently to manage them responsibly, prioritizing human security and collective prosperity rather than serving narrow interests, as has historically been the case. Given the consistent record of governance failures and the unprecedented nature of these technological threats, placing humanity's collective destiny in the hands of a small cohort of political leaders, oligarchs, and autocrats represents an unacceptable risk that the broader human population must not tolerate. Part 3. A new framework for global governance, quantum AI. So meanwhile, what do the 9 billion humans belonging to all nations of the world do? Part 3. A new framework for global governance, quantum AI. So meanwhile, what do the 9 billion humans belonging to all nations of the world do? Should we just wait on the sidelines and witness this new geopolitics chess game and power struggle between two superpowers with totally opposite ideologies play out? Should we just let the politicians, dictators, and elites keep playing Russian roulette with the world as we bet on the dreadful consequences? Or should we collectively act as the rightful and as by far the largest stakeholders on the planet to ensure protection of our humanity and future of biological life on this planet? And the word we here means all the global citizens of the world. People who have been conditioned through the centuries to have governments look out for the safety and welfare now must break free of that conditioning. We, the people, do have a choice, but most of us, A, do not know about this choice, and B, we are not able to organize and mobilize a global effort and sufficient power to turn around the governance systems of the world that can ensure our mutual survival. The failed patterns of governance characterized throughout human history suggest that overwhelming of monarchs, politicians, military dictators, and oligarchs are not on humanity's side. They value power, wealth, and security for their own selfish being and their own loved ones only, and that's it. If anyone disagrees, please write in the comments and explain why the majority of the humans on planet Earth have suffered hunger, disease, short lives, and death throughout the centuries, while a handful have gotten insanely rich and own majority of global assets. A new framework for global governance and rules must emerge to counter the forthcoming debacle of a divided world living on the edge of extinction. This new model of governance has to prevent a few privileged humans and organizations formed and run by them from dividing our world and act as the sole deciders of the fate of all of humanity. The world governance model for the future should be specifically designed for the oversight of these powerful technologies and also prevent the control of human destiny by a few governments, megacorporations, and elite individuals who may lead us towards total annihilation. Let's now talk about such a framework. First, this framework is centered around a private organization owned by people of the world and not by governments of nations. It must provide for the opinions of the entire voting population of humans on Earth. Second, it must include representatives from all nations and cultures. Third, the representatives must not be government officials or politicians. Fourth, it must be empowered by artificial superintelligence, quantum computers, and blockchain technology. And fifth, the governing council, aided by the collective wisdom of artificial superintelligence entities, will keep the leaders of nations focused on shared values and emphasis on spirituality over materialism. They will also guide world leaders in matters and decisions that have global ramifications, such as conflict resolution, preservation of the planet's ecosystems, resource and wealth allocation, equity in living standards, quality of education, etc. This private organization is a multinational, multicultural organization comprised of the most brilliant scientists and administrative professionals from all over the world who act as the governing members. It has people from USA, China, Russia, EU, Middle East, North and South Korea, Palestine, Israel, Australia, Malaysia, Indonesia, and all countries from South America and African continent. You can think of this organization as the United Human Organization, or UHO, funded directly by the citizens of the world and not by governments. Its governing members are scientists, doctors, lawyers, engineers, physicists, historians, journalists, and other professionals handpicked from each country through a global blockchain-based shortlisting and reputation voting mechanism. There will be no room for religious clerics or pundits in this organization's governing council. Each nation's representatives are chosen by the people directly to represent their nation in the UHO governing council. In the reputation tokens voting formula, a high weightage is given to benevolence, compassion, and consideration for the survival of the planet, human species, and all other life forms sharing the planet. There must be strict vetting to block corrupt, greedy, immoral, cruel, racist, and otherwise unethical people from entering the governance circle through a 100% foolproof, full disclosure and transparency mechanism. The governance members' reputation token will be automatically and frequently voted upon and must maintain a high score of over 95% for them to retain their seat at the governance council. All the citizens of the world above the age of 18 are eligible to vote for the shortlisted nominees. Each voter has a self-sovereign and decentralized proof of human identity and a wallet through which they can vote, and also make their financial contributions to the UHO operating and R&D financing pool. Individuals, organizations, and businesses from all across the world who can afford to contribute from as little as $1 a month to up to a maximum of $2,000 only per month are encouraged to set up automatic monthly contributions. The UHO will be an organization to watch after the interest of all humans and will have no resemblance to the United Nations organization of today, which is funded and run by a handful of wealthy nations and hence works for the interests of a few. There will be no concept of a veto by citizen members representing nuclear-armed states. The next big question, and the most difficult to solve, is who will form this organization? Who will take on this monumental initiative? The answer can be found in learning from the beginnings of Bitcoin. Basically, the initiative to launch Bitcoin was taken by a few genius individuals who had witnessed the death of Western neoliberal capitalism after the 2008 global financial debacle. They were not alone because many neoliberal capitalist fans, like Richard Wolff and Jeffrey Sachs, too, had a 180 degrees change of opinion. In 2008, people got exposed to the ugly global financial machinery, with all its nuts and bolts under the hood. They saw how dollars can be printed from thin air and distributed by the powerful among themselves. People were finally exposed to the centuries-old secret of the magic of money and began to understand why the rich kept getting richer. How the global financial systems have been rigged against the common citizens all along, especially after World War II. How the misuse of the fractional reserve system and supply-side, trickle-down economics of Arthur Laffer and President Ronald Reagan, the 40th president of U.S., exacerbated the wealth divide in the Western world. How the unbridled printing of dollars empowered the Western military-industrial complex to wage reckless wars without any accountability. How paper money, without the backing of any real assets, tempted greedy politicians to launch invasions of Iraq and other countries, causing death and destruction for millions of innocent citizens, not to mention setting the stage for the beginning of the decline of the U.S. empire. The rise of the blockchain phenomenon and the first decentralized digital currency that we know of as Bitcoin was no coincidence. It was a direct challenge to the corrupt financial system of the world run by the elites in power. Bitcoin gave ordinary people an alternative to control their own financial destiny. No government, organization, financial institution, or individual could, nor can, ever control or manipulate Bitcoin, and it has now gained the status of a better-than-gold store of value international asset. The technology behind Bitcoin, that is blockchain, turned out to be larger and more powerful than anybody could have ever imagined. Since Bitcoin's launch, many new blockchains, cryptocurrencies, and related technologies have emerged, solidifying blockchain as the best trust machine to ensure transparency, immutability, traceability, fast frictionless transactions, consensus among the participants, and most importantly, privacy and security through reliable encryption technology. These features make blockchain the most suitable technology for transparent voting and elections, digital currencies, transparent decentralized governance, and building models for accountability. Blockchains now have become platforms for creative cross-border financial investment instruments, asset tokenization, fundraising, crowdfunding, and wealth distribution mechanisms. Sadly, not everyone wants blockchain technology to advance rapidly, and the reasons for this is obvious. There is an old saying, if you want to know who is in power and who controls you, just find out who you are not allowed to criticize. Apply this to blockchain and cryptocurrency, And you will learn that banks and investment institutions are creating the biggest obstructions by facilitating regulations that discourage the adoption of blockchain technology. They know that blockchain will cause them to lose out on over $3 trillion that they snatch from consumers in just money transfer transactions and administrative fees annually. Similarly, politicians don't want blockchain voting because if people use blockchain to vote, the politicians will not be able to rig elections. Blockchain is a perfect technology for efficient voting and vote counting. It has proven to near 100% accurate. Investment merchants discourage the use of blockchain because if blockchain becomes mainstream, they will not be able to manipulate the stock market. With blockchain, the markets can remain open 24 hours a day, every single day of the year, just like the crypto trading markets. Moreover, with blockchain trading, markets will be transparent and fair trading will take place since all shares are represented by digital tokens and observable on the blockchain. There are so many other areas that blockchain can transform the way we live, work, and transact, but there is enormous resistance and pushback to its adoption by those who benefit from chaos, misinformation, lack of information, propagation of fake news, market manipulation, lack of transparency and accountability, etc. Bitcoin was conceived after the 2008 global financial crisis and now has replaced many currencies and metals as the best store of value. It cannot depreciate in value and cannot be controlled by those who have a tendency to control everything. Learning from Bitcoin's success, it is our hope that a few super genius individuals will conceive a decentralized model for world governance for the future. No one says it will be easy, but humans after all have come up with or invented far more challenging and near impossible technology and solutions. It is now possible to design a crowdfunding, technology development, and governance model using blockchain and raise $20 billion globally to finance the development of this ASI entity comprising of quantum computers and AIs with blockchain and smart contracts as its master controller to enforce the Constitution of the United Human Organization. The urgent need for this initiative to get started without delay is the fact that large corporations and governments are battling each other for quantum AI supremacy. They are in a race to be the first to develop artificial superintelligence for very predictable reasons. World domination is their primary goal. USA does not want China to develop ASI capability first. China does not want USA to get that capability. Russia, Israel, India, EU, Japan, and all others want ASI capabilities as a deterrent. And the consequences of this hurried and reckless race are going to be devastating for humanity overall. Similarly, since corporations are accountable to their shareholders, they primarily seek profits and market dominance. They want to dominate the market and amass as much wealth as they can for their shareholders and are in the race for higher profits. Benefiting the rest of humanity is just a small line item on corporations' balance sheets and is not their main goal. The frightening scenario of powerful nations and mega corporations controlling quantum AI, the most powerful and lethal technology that humans can and will ever create, is simply unacceptable to overwhelming majority of humans. The motivation behind the unprecedented Global Citizens Initiative and collaboration is clear. Large corporations and governments must not be allowed to take the lead in developing ASI because they can't be trusted with the keys to humanity's future and destiny. The United Human Organization must be the first to develop ASI, with its command and control systems existing on a decentralized and hardened network of global blockchains and fully transparent to all of humanity. This ASI must be designed for running the world on behalf of world citizens and will not serve the interests of a handful of governments, corporations, or oligarchs. We strongly believe that artificial superintelligence capabilities in the hands of a united human organization are the only hope that can unite humanity and bring about a technology-driven utopia. If citizens of the world continue depending on governments to unite humanity, it simply won't happen. The potential for quantum artificial intelligence to profoundly benefit humanity is immense, promising revolutionary advancements across multiple critical domains. This combination of near-miracle technologies holds the capability to accelerate our understanding of the natural world dramatically. Here is just a glimpse of the possibilities. In materials science, quantum AI can facilitate breakthroughs such as the design of room-temperature superconductors, ultra-efficient solar cells, and biodegradable plastics. In the realm of healthcare, it can simulate molecular interactions with unprecedented precision, dramatically shortening drug development timelines from years to mere months, and enabling personalized medicine tailored precisely to individual needs. Similarly, quantum AI holds promise for climate science by creating more accurate climate models, optimizing carbon capture technologies, and significantly improving weather forecasting. Beyond scientific discovery, quantum AI has the potential to optimize societal systems and resource management, drastically reducing waste and inefficiency. We could transform our energy infrastructure world, creating smarter grids that seamlessly integrate renewable energy sources while reducing waste. Transportation and logistics could become significantly more efficient through complex quantum-optimized routing, resulting in lower fuel consumption, reduced emissions, and quicker deliveries. Likewise, supply chain management could be revolutionized, becoming resilient enough to anticipate and prevent disruptions while equitably balancing global resource distribution. Imagine a world enabled by quantum AI, where every resource is precisely allocated to address humanity's greatest challenges. In this envisioned utopia, material abundance would be achievable through perfectly predictive supply chains that eliminate waste and quantum-optimized fusion reactors delivering clean, unlimited energy globally. Food security could be guaranteed by indoor farming systems optimized to maximum efficiency, ensuring nutritional abundance worldwide. Health and longevity could reach unprecedented levels in this quantum AI-enabled society. Quantum simulations could eradicate diseases by identifying cures and treatments through precise molecular modeling. Advances in understanding aging at a cellular level could substantially extend healthy lifespans, while enhanced comprehension of neurochemistry could dramatically improve mental well-being. Furthermore, societal systems could become harmoniously coordinated, fulfilling individuals' needs through optimized governance and decision-making processes. Education could undergo a revolution, utilizing personalized learning systems designed specifically to match each individual's unique neural patterns. Such tailored educational approaches would unlock unprecedented creative expression and deeper cross-cultural understanding, fostering cultural flourishing worldwide. Despite these promising developments, a fully coordinated society can balance this utopian potential with realistic considerations. Human governance will remain central, with artificial superintelligence, ASI, serving primarily as an enabling tool rather than a replacement for human oversight. Human flourishing will continue to be the defining characteristic of this technological utopia. Achieving this future will require first a global awareness and then a commitment to collective responsibility, ensuring inclusive, transparent decision-making regarding technology deployment and management. The future we build depends upon our careful stewardship of these transformative technologies. In conclusion, as a human species, we stand at a critical juncture in our collective human history, facing an alarming scenario where two global superpowers with extremely opposing ideologies, already heavily armed with weapons of mass destruction, are poised to acquire artificial superintelligence, ASI, capabilities. Their competing ambitions for global hegemony risk perpetuating global divisions and fostering continuous conflicts, with unpredictable and potentially catastrophic outcomes. This scenario closely parallels the geopolitical tensions experienced during the 20th century Cold War, but poses far greater risks due to the unprecedented capabilities inherent in ASI. Given these challenges, a crucial question arises. Can the global community of citizens independently unite to harness the disruptive yet potentially beneficial powers of ASI? Moreover, is it feasible to develop and deploy a benevolent ASI tasked explicitly with managing global affairs according to humanity's shared aspirations and ethical standards? The successful and ethical utilization of these powerful technologies requires a significant shift in our collective mindset. Soon, the power to shape our collective future will be firmly within our grasp, demanding deliberate consideration about the kind of world we aim to create. Will we permit ASI to be controlled by individual governments or private corporations with narrow interests focused solely on power and dominance? Alternatively, will we embrace a collaborative approach to ensure these transformative technologies serve all humanity equitably? The Global Citizens Initiative exemplifies one promising path forward, where technological advancement aligns with the collective good rather than narrow, self-serving interests. By guiding ASI development through a diverse, multinational collaborative framework committed to humanity's overall well-being, we can maximize its benefits while proactively mitigating potential risks. As we navigate this technological crossroads, we bear the profound responsibility and unique opportunity to choose wisely. The very future of humanity may depend upon our decisions today. Imagine a world where hunger is eradicated, diseases become relics of the past, and every individual has the chance to fulfill their unique potential. Such a world, while ambitious, is increasingly attainable as we enter the era of advanced artificial intelligence and quantum computing. These groundbreaking technologies alone will not automatically deliver this ideal future, yet they equip us with unprecedented tools to collaboratively build it. Just as classical computing and innovative software revolutionized society during the 20th century, quantum computing coupled with AI promises to redefine our possibilities in the 21st century. Envision a world where humanity has overcome its greatest challenges and can fully embrace exploration, creativity, and meaningful connections. Thank you for watching and taking the time to explore this critical conversation about our collective future. As we stand at the edge of a technological revolution, we cannot afford to be passive observers. The stakes are too high. We urge you, don't just stand by. Become aware. Educate others. Ask questions. Speak up. And, most importantly, join the global movement to ensure that the future of artificial superintelligence is benevolent and it belongs to all of humanity, not a handful of governments or corporations. The future is not something to wait for. It's something we must actively build together.